was just thinking about like how the dark side has probably become one of the most overused phrases in our workshops, lives, talks. I feel like we're just obsessed with the shadow of the world, of ourselves, and of all of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, there is a lot of darkness out there, right? And the only way to bring light to it is by confronting it. And, we do that by talking and running these lives and workshops as well.
For sure. I think this topic is something that a lot of Western practitioners in the plant medicine space don't want to touch with the barge pole for obvious reasons. And I think that's reflective, being British, of the kind of mass burial of our extended history of colonization that we've essentially just tried to erase. I even think back to like being at school and the education system and how they just don't talk about anything that happened. And so because of that lack of education, the same patterns are playing out in many different areas, spirituality more broadly, but particularly plant medicine. And I think because there's no literal violence or invasion taking place, it's very easy to just dismiss these things as not significant and not as harmful. But we're going to shed some light on those things and the effects of them, and how to work more ethically within this space as well. And I guess the flip side, and this is the bit that is very un-PC to talk about, is that there are limitations to just full respect of the traditions and their practices, because we're working in a different part of the world with different problems, and there's a lot of complexity there. It's not as simple as just like, okay, well, we'll leave those people with their plant medicines and go and work it with them in their ways, because at the end of the day, people come back to cities or the Western world and have to deal with the many challenges that are presented by virtue of that. So yeah, it's very murky territory with a lot of sensitivity, but hopefully we can. It's a big task, isn't it? But hopefully we can shed some light on
Yeah,
those topics
definitely.
today. So I thought we could start just by talking a little bit about colonization, what that is for anyone who's not familiar with it, and then move into how it's kind of playing out in the medicine space and, yeah, the history. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. So, absolutely, like going through the education system here in the UK, we didn't cover colonialism at all. It was only on the other side when, self-inquiry that led to my knowledge, and more recent times, like studying indigenous perspectives really got me into learning more about it. And so on one level, we can say it's Europeans going and conquering other parts of the world, taking over land, taking over the rights, the customs, the traditions, and absolutely, especially in indigenous communities, wiping out populations through butchering, through killings, through diseases, intentional diseases being spread. And that's the legacy we're living with. And only recently I learned how, through colonization, the Western religions were being also spread, and the rules that come with the religious practices were spreading to all these other parts of the world where, like, homosexuality was the norm in lots of places. But then religion comes along and then it becomes illegal, and a legacy of colonialism there as well.
Yeah, yeah, and just to give people an idea of the extent of this, there were Britain in particular colonised at one point in history a quarter of the world had we had invaded and claimed as British territory. So this is something that was hugely widespread and that people all over the world, geographies, are still living with the very real imprints and wounds of the effect of that colonisation. And whilst we are no longer invading countries and pillaging, claiming what's there, the cultural appropriation that happens when we visit these places and take their wisdom, their medicines, and commodify those and export them is a form of neo-colonization, and that can be just as damaging and just as harmful. And so we see this a lot with plant medicine, like these are ayahuasca, iboga, peyote, all these medicines that have been carried by the tribes for centuries that now, and you know, this idea of the shaman being something that you could only be by birth, by lineage, and they would spend years training to learn the skills needed to work with these medicines. And the kind of psychedelic renaissance is essentially seeing loads of Western practitioners going into those spaces, working with those medicines, and not always having the adequate training or skill. That's one thing. But also there not being a fair exchange or reciprocity in terms of using these medicines and profiting off them. But the people who really gave them to us are not benefiting from those practices. And so there are many different schools of thoughts in terms of how do we as Westerners deal with this fairly and sensitively, because a lot of people say, oh, we just shouldn't, you should only go to Peru to drink ayahuasca, or to Africa to try iboga, and that would solve the problem. But we are doing the delicate dance of wanting to navigate those sensitivities, but also acknowledge the fact that people living in the West have very unique circumstances and problems that the indigenous healers, and I feel awkward even saying this because it is very on PC, but like they're not equipped for dealing with people from the West is the reality. The framework that they work with the medicine in is in a beautiful community setting, completely immersed in nature, connected to their inherent nature as nature. And so that's part of their healing container, that when we go there to drink ayahuasca and then 2-3 weeks later we come back and we're plonked back into our flats in London with our chronic overstimulation and our siloed way of living, disconnected from one another, it doesn't work. It doesn't have the same impact, and it's very rare for people to be able to make and maintain sustained long-term changes by just doing 1 or 2 ceremonies without the necessary bridging that one needs to be able to really take an experience like that and make life-changing transformation in this part of the world. And that's no disrespect to plant medicine and its potential. It's really just acknowledging how fucked the Western world is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add one more to your list. So, in the Western world, when we look at healing, it's individual, it's about fixing a problem, and it comes from the rational mind where everything has to be scientifically proved. And as you've just shared, Indigenous people, it's nature community, but it's also they see people as out of balance. Here, people need fixing. There, they need rebalancing. And so already the cosmologies are so different. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's complicated because it would be very easy to just look at the systems that we have here and say this is the problem, and to a certain extent it is. Like, the way that we're living is making people sick because it's not natural. We are animals, we are nature, and we are living like robots.
Yeah.
And yet the system, I'd love to change it, I'd love to collapse it, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. And so, yeah, these are the questions we've really been asking. Like, what are the frameworks that we need as Westerners to really be able to work with plant medicine in a way that's not just chasing peak experiences that then disappear into the void of daily life, but really building robust tools that mean that we can live in this part of the world and still have these expansive, life altering experiences.
Yeah. It's, as you were just sharing, there's a Jungian analyst by the name of Jerome Bernstein. He wrote a book called The Borderland, and he talks about our relationship to nature. It's either reciprocity or dominion. And the indigenous way is I can't say that word, reciprocity. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where we are animals, we are nature. It's living in harmony. There's give and take. So when we're working with nature, there's offerings, there's ritual. Yet the dominion is what the industrial world is built on, seeing nature as separate and seeing us as superior. So we just take, take, take. And when we want to work with the medicine, it's working with nature. And so how do we bridge that gap to stick with the essence of reciprocity? Is, yeah, as you say, to change the entire system, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But the more we talk about it, the more we can start, you know, individuals coming together in community and building that reciprocity in these parts of the world.
yeah, yeah. And I think from a like kind of ethical perspective, the sourcing of the medicine is one thing. The other thing is profiting from the medicine, and how you can use commercial gain to also support the issues that are directly affecting the indigenous community. So, like, we're donating part of our profits to a foundation that focuses on forest protection and protecting indigenous communities. And that way, there is a fair exchange of like something that's benefiting us will also go back to benefit the people who have given us this medicine, rather than just like taking it and running with it. I was thinking also earlier about like yoga is a really extreme example of this, that people just kind of
Yeah.
don't even really think about, but it's been completely homogenized and westernized and very rarely are practitioners giving back some of their profits
Yeah,
to the people who created this, and we just normalize that. And I think at the minute there's still some awareness around plant medicine and where these medicines have come from and sensitivity, but I could see like in 5, 10, 15 years it will be exactly the same as yoga. It will be completely normalized that we've just taken this stuff and whitewashed it and made it our own. And that's why I think now is the time to be having these conversations, to put this on people's radars, the people who are thinking about having journeys, to really impress the importance of that ethics and in integrity in the sourcing and the reciprocity with the organizations that you work with, because it's not always viable for someone to go and disappear into the jungle for a period of time, but it's still important to think about the exchange that's going on, and really, are you supporting neo colonization, or are you supporting the tribes that who are the real carriers and owners of this medicine?
yeah, absolutely. As you're sharing the yoga example, like so many influencers are, all you need is just to take the medicine, go on a retreat, and that is the trend, right? And not only in South America and Africa, like I was in Bali last year, and it's like horrific, like the trend. So yeah, absolutely, we need to stop it now.
Yeah, the commodification is another thing that I want to talk about, because this is a sort of common theme with colonization of like taking really precious, sacred things and turning them into objects for
Yeah,
sale, essentially. And that's capitalism in action. And how do we get around that and move away from that commodification? And it's something that people talk about a lot in the plant medicine space, is this idea that you drink ayahuasca, it's like 10 years of therapy, and almost this idea that it's like a shortcut.
mm,
And the reality is like it's it's not. It's a short term shortcut. It can give you an elevated experience, take you to an elevated state for a short period of time. But there are no shortcuts, is the truth. And that's a very untrendy thing to say, because from a marketing perspective, everyone in the capitalist world is like, give me the thing that's going to save me time, give me the thing that's going to mean that I don't have to do 10 years of therapy. But the reality is, when you ground, when you come back into your body, when you sit at home in your flat in London, you still have to sit there with the discomfort of your internal world and emotional state and work through everything that brings up. And the vast majority of practitioners in the Western world are not providing the frameworks or tools to help people with that process. They're very happy to do the ceremonies and enjoy the peak and the afterglow that follows, but we have unique problems living in the systems that we're living in, and they require much more robust psychological and emotional work to really make positive, lasting change.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's so much to say about this. We're kind of that get rich quick, get well quick kind of approach. The medical world here in the Western world, you take a pill and you get better. And if that's the mindset people are going in, for an ayahuasca retreat or a plant medicine retreat thinking it's going to solve all your problems. Like, that's the fashionable marketing message there, but as you say, it requires work, like hard work, and the framework that we're putting together, I believe, is bridging that in terms of honoring the reciprocity in terms of nature and eco-psychology, as well as, so indigenous tribes, like when they work with the medicine, they're chanting and drumming and or offerings and rituals. And how can we add those tools to our daily practice? And it's possible if as practitioners we can show people, guide people, train people, and encourage them. Because I know I do the practices, I know you do as well, and if we can be examples and role models, I think it can it can take that experience to much deeper levels.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I know I said that like my dream, my wild ambition would be to only ever work with a person once, because you could equip them with everything that they needed to take that journey and continue to integrate it and peel back more layers and watch it expand in their day-to-day life, because you and I have both experienced that that's possible. You can be integrating one ceremony for a decade because it continues to give to you once you're connected to that medicine, to that particular field with the right tools. And having been running these retreats now for several years, we've seen huge variation in terms of what happens longer term for people. And it's undeniable that the people who had done the foundational preparation work in terms of psychotherapies, somatic work, shadow work, dream analysis, who had the toolkits are the ones who are carrying those experiences forward in a meaningful way, versus people who don't do that foundational work, who don't have those tools in place in their life, in which case it can become very destabilizing, because you're essentially cranking open the lid on Pandora's box, and then all the stuff that you've been avoiding for your entire life comes flooding out, and you don't really know what to do with it. And so, yeah, ethically, as practitioners, I think what we've been grappling with is like, can we really ethically conduct ceremonies if we're not also training people on how to navigate the depth and the force and the intensity of what can come up in that space? And there are a million places you can go if you just want to do a ceremony and experience that and see what happens, but not with us. We're
No,
retiring. We're retiring from that game.
yeah, and I also have seen how people chase the experience, like chasing the high, and what we're doing is beyond the high. And so through the preparation to allow people to fully experience the medicine, because it can be confronting, it can feel uneasy, and in those moments the rational mind wants to take over and not go there to protect. And so if people can already experience sitting with the discomfort through some of the training that we'll be sharing, like the emotional release session is about sitting with the discomfort. And so when the discomfort happens in ceremony, I hear people all the time say, I didn't go deep enough. It's a way to just notice, okay, this has happened and we've practiced this for 4 weeks, so we can carry on in the safety that we can hold that for ourselves as individuals. And we talk about the shadow, the dark side. Again, it comes up all the time. But once you know that's the shadow and what it's pointing to, in indigenous communities, they talk about soul loss, and the shaman might journey to help bring back pieces of the soul. When you shadow work, it's those pieces those parts of us that we've suppressed and repressed. It's bringing those parts back to us to get to that wholeness, to get to that balance. So it's not fixing us; it's reminding us who we are and being okay with those parts that we might call dark. And so, yeah, the preparation is really thought out on what we call the 5 pillars of integration: the emotions, the mind, so the body, the physical, as well as the spiritual, and community. So healing takes place in community, and so we want to bring that community set up so everyone knows everybody else before they've even gone there. So you're not meeting complete strangers, you're getting to know people and you're doing the work all together. So we're bridging a lot of those indigenous practices into a framework that makes sense for this part of the world.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to share a bit more about the training, and then I think to close, let's share like some pointers and guidance on how to navigate non-neo-colonial practices in the plant medicine space, both for practitioners and for people looking to do ceremonies.
Yeah, let's do it. So the training, there's 4 training sessions before we go to the retreat, and then we have the ceremonies, 2 ceremonies, and then on the other side we'll have another 4 training sessions. So the first session will be looking at emotional release, how we can sit with the emotions, differentiate between feeling and emotion, and the emotional cycle that happens, and how we can be with it, because there's a temptation always when something discomforting comes up is to numb it. We have our own coping mechanisms. A packet of chocolate digestives does the trick for me. But what happens if I
And
don't
for
go
most
for it?
people,
Pardon?
and for most people, I feel like the vast majority of people we speak to, they say it is junk food.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens if we don't go for that? What happens if we can just sit with that for 30 seconds, for 90 seconds? And it's really powerful what does happen. And so we'll be sharing ways to do that, and also to release that as well, because we don't want that energy to be stuck. The second looks at the shadow, one of our favorite topics, how to identify the shadow and how to integrate that. So the shadow, as I mentioned earlier, is all the things that we suppress, repress, deny, or accept that's a part of us. And there could be good things, positive things, and negatives in there, the golden shadow and the dark shadow. We then look at breath work and how we bridge the mind with the emotions through the breath. And there's different types of breathing techniques to activate the parasympathetic, which is about rest and rejuvenation, and then the sympathetic, which is about action and alertness. And conscious connected breathing is another form of release. And so we'll be sharing those patterns of breathing, and we look at dreams and dream works. Dreams are the symbols and images from our psyche, and we know working with plant medicine can amplify our dreams and take us even deeper. And so we want to work with dreams to build that connection with the unconscious before we've taken the medicine. And on the other side, with the integration, we'll be looking at nature. We've spoken quite a lot about nature today, and the reciprocity. I will get that word right. And so a lot of that is about um, maintaining that connection, because when we take the medicine, we do feel an amplified connection to nature. And how can we enhance that? How can we be in tune with that? And then we will look at archetypes and myth as a way of placing our own personal stories, because it's a spiral. We go round and round, and sometimes we spot patterns, and then we can spot a myth and which archetypes speak to us. And it's a way of visioning in terms of what do we want to create, how can we work with the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, and create that future that we want. And we then look at creative expression. And there's, Carl Jung talks about living the symbolic life. And through plant medicine journeys, we sometimes see images, we get insights and wisdom, and a way to bridge that symbolic to the here and now is through creative expression. And so many ways to do that. And so these are topics that allow people a place to come and join with intent, because we might know this stuff but they never do. But what the training will encourage everyone to do is come together to do the work consistently. And the final training session will be on visioning. We know, again, plant medicine, neuroplasticity and metaplasticity pathways. So there's like a window of time where we've taken the medicine and we can create new behaviors, new actions. And through the visioning, it's like, what are those behaviors? Where do we want to be in 6 months from now? And what actions do we want to, can we bring into our lives? And it's very much doing the work, continuing to do the work in a container that prepares you for the ceremonies. And then on the other side, real integration. I think that kind of summarizes the training. I don't know if I've missed anything there.
No, that was great. Thanks, Mo. And then just general guidance for conducting retreat ceremonies, going to retreat ceremonies in a non-neo-colonial way for practitioners. Would say like permission, respect, humility, and train with the tribes, with the indigenous people directly, because then you're getting real-time feedback and information on their comfort levels with you working with their medicines. And then reciprocity, fair exchange. So if you're profiting, how are they profiting, the communities who are the real carriers of this medicine? And it's very easy. It's a financial question, like how are you paying it back? And a lot of retreats will say, yeah, we buy the medicine from the tribes, but that's not really like the essence of fair exchange. Just sourcing is like the absolute bare minimum. Beyond that, like how are the profits from your work with the medicine directly helping the communities? And there are tons of different organizations that are doing work to support indigenous communities, protecting the rainforest. It's not difficult, but it requires intention and awareness. And for people doing ceremonies, like these are the questions that you need to be asking the people organizing your retreat. How are they sourcing their medicine? Where did they receive their training? And what are they doing to make sure that the proceeds or the profits from the retreats that they're organizing are going back to helping the people who are the true owners and carriers of these medicines?
Yeah, for facilitators, I'll add to do the work themselves, to find actual mentors and role models. I'm blessed. Like, I know you, Melissa, to be working with you. with this work, but then also I've got other mentors like David and Bonnie, and when we went out and met Kat and Elio, like people who are in the Western world who 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 are doing the work and have such reverence for where the medicine originates from. And so if you're a facilitator, do the work, study, learn about the history of, the colonialism, and also if you can find others who are, walking this path ethically. That's what I would add, and also to carry on doing the shadow work, because we've spoken about it, like the ethics. This, we have vulnerable people coming to us all the time, and to know like when I can work with someone and when I can't, and know that I'm in a position of power, and power can corrupt, and so having people who can hold you accountable. And yeah, so as facilitators, to carry on training and learning and find a community of others who are walking this path.
Yeah, I love that kind of broad ethical point beyond just this specific issue, but in general, as facilitators, to like always be looking at yourself and your conduct under the magnifying glass. So many people come into this space with the purest of intention and the naivety to not realize that they're capable of all the worst things of humanity, just like everybody else. And when you are in a space where people are constantly saying, "Oh, you're amazing, that was wonderful, thank you so much," it's so easy to not look at yourself with that level of scrutiny that is absolutely necessary to stay on purpose from an integrity and ethical perspective. So yeah, I'm glad you raised that as well, Mo, because it's very, very broad application in the spiritual world. It's a fine line between doing good
Yeah,
and being a dickhead.